Good evening, New Mexico. It's Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, and I'm at the New Mexico Military Institute, which is one of the sheltering locations in Roswell. We continue to get incredible reports about the service and support by so many New Mexicans who are volunteering their time and goods and services, and other folks from the community who are joining in to both lift up in spirit so many New Mexicans who have been negatively impacted and evacuated by this fire, but also to make sure they have everything they need during this evacuation. I'm joined by Congresswoman Melanie Stansberry, who represents many people in this area. Earlier we had Congressman Gabe Vasquez, who also represents people in this area. The Congresswoman and I are going to kind of like share this from our perspectives, largely because we share constituents. So we want to be organized and supportive. While we don't want there to be a wrong door, we don't want people to have to chase us for information. So we're working really hard to minimize that. General Aguilar, of course, leads the New Mexico National Guard, but he's also the lead for our Homeland Security Department, so he's got 2 full-time jobs. Now, he's been on the ground here with many men and women, and as you might imagine from the Guard, they are responsible for everything, including sometimes firefighting if their trained firefighters have been called to that task. Otherwise, the hotshot crews, our job is to let them do what they are trained to do. They are trained to fight fires. They are trained to win that fight against fires, and that's just what they're doing. I also asked Mayor Tim Jennings of Roswell to join us. He's, as you know, been very visible to make sure that there's nothing is left unattended in terms of the resources and support that Roswell can provide to the victims of the fire and just to the community in general. And Mayor, I appreciate your efforts so much. So here's some basic updates. One, we were here to have a meeting with the Incident Command Team. The purpose of that is the teams come in and clarify management. Now that may seem like they should have done that to begin with. No, they send resources into the fire. That's the first thing that we have to do. You identify who's at risk. You either determine that you need an evacuation or not. We saw that play out in the first 24 hours. In the second 24 hours and so, we try to make sure that the communications and the management efforts are underway and stabilized. They are doing an incredible job. We did that in Alamogordo today. The big news from that meeting is that we're going to see anywhere from 200 to 300 additional firefighting personnel. Now, given that we're all challenged by resources in fire season around the country, the clarity here about the risks to people in high living areas, concentrations like Ruidoso, is sufficient to make sure that we've got the right firefighting personnel. We did have satellite imagery from yesterday. It basically confirms cloud cover prevented some of the images that we were hoping for. So the information that we all have is that we've lost about 1,400 structures. Now, many in the media already reported that. Thank you. What we also believe to be the case, it's not confirmed, that about 500 homes are in that mix, again making this one of the most devastating fires in New Mexico's history. Now, I know many of you are getting images and information from people who are working the fire, who may not have evacuated, and they might have information that we don't have. And so I don't want New Mexicans or the press to assume that we don't all have consistent facts, but just recognize that there's not a total control of information. Probably there shouldn't be. But the negative of that is it doesn't always roll up in the way I'm sure the press and New Mexicans would like it to, so that it's consistent. We'll get more data about structures and issues, frankly, as the weather clears and we can get better imagery and more people start to do the groundwork when it's safe to really determine the devastation and impact of both Salt and South Fork fire. And the one thing I'd like the Congresswoman to talk about is the state finished its work and got our information over to FEMA, asking for the federal government or President Biden to declare a national emergency. And her job and the delegation's job is to make sure that we get the resources that we need.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Governor. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I'm deeply proud and honored to be able to represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. You are actually just right across the line. Our district encompasses 10 counties, including all of Lincoln County and part of Chavez and Otero. So these are some of the major communities impacted by this fire. Congressman Vasquez also represents part of Mescalero Apache, which is also, of course, the epicenter of the fire, and the tribe is very much working every day to make sure everyone is safe. I want to amplify some of the things that the governor said, but first, before I do that, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of our firefighters, our first responders, the emergency crews who are out there on the front lines, state, federal, local, tribal. There is not a single emergency person in this state who is not somehow actively helping to support this fire and the fire response right now. So we want to say thank you to all of our first responders across the state and on the front line. And I also want to take this opportunity to say to all of the families out there who are displaced, who are worried, who don't know what is going to happen in the coming days, we are unified. We are here to stand with you, to help support you. And my office, along with the entire delegation, the governor's office, our state, local, and tribal authorities are working hand in hand, and we will be there for you every single point along the way. Now, in terms of the federal response, as the governor said, today a federal incident command was stood up. This is what happens when there is a major fire involving federal lands. The fire started on Mescalero Apache lands and is abutting on Lincoln County, the Lincoln National Forest. So there is a major federal role here. BIA and the Forest Service are coordinating very closely. We are in constant contact with both the leadership of Department of Interior as well as USDA, and we are very fortunate that we have 2 New Mexico women at the head of those agencies who have been helping very closely on all these issues. The Incident Command's job, as the governor said, is to keep a handle on what's happening on the ground, to predict and to help guide the efforts for firefighting with the state and local and tribal authorities, and to keep people safe. We were briefed earlier today. We do know that hopefully with the incoming of the moisture that we're seeing, the fire conditions will improve in the coming days, but we are not out of the woods yet. The fire will continue to burn over the coming days, and the Incident Command will be the lead in those efforts and in distributing information. We do want to say to any of you that have been given evacuation orders, please do not return until you are cleared to do so. It is unsafe to return. In addition to the fire risks, there are also flood warning risks because of the rain, so we need folks to stay away. Now, the governor has, as she just said, done her work. The state has launched an extraordinary effort across all of the different fire as well as emergency response teams, but we are not going to be able to do this without federal support. So the governor did ask for a federal disaster declaration today from President Biden. She submitted it this afternoon. The delegation, all 5 members, including our 2 senators and 3 congressional representatives, have echoed the governor's ask and sent a letter to President Biden. Both Senator Heinrich and Lujan were at the White House yesterday and spoke personally with the president about it, and it is my understanding that he very much intends to sign that declaration within the next 12 to 24 hours. So we will make sure that people know as soon as that happens. Now, the importance of that disaster declaration is that it unlocks federal resources, and the governor's order asks for help across every FEMA area that can provide both assistance for housing, individual support, as well as community support as both the fire is being battled and in the aftermath. And so that is just very, very important. The final thing I will say before I turn it back to the governor is that we anticipate that the costs of this recovery will be very high, partly because of the structure fires. And so I have already personally spoken with the leadership in the House and put on their radar that we will likely be asking for emergency funding as part of a supplemental, as happened with the Maui fire last year. So with that, I'll turn it back to the governor and just say thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and right back at you. I want to tell a quick story, do two more quick updates, and then ask the mayor, and we're ready for questions. At the Capitan shelter, I met a man who had moved here to New Mexico and was living in Alta. And as everyone has done so far in our visits, have extolled the incredible work and virtues of the men and women in these shelters who are giving them everything they need. A couple of folks here today told me that this gets 5 stars on any of the apps that would rate this as a place to stay or a hotel. It's incredible the way people are being treated. But he said that he'd been through a disaster in Louisiana, a couple, and that it takes weeks or months to get shelters and get people on the same page and to start working through the federal issues, and was very impressed. And I want to echo that. This is not always that typical. It should. This should be the model all across the United States. It isn't that it's perfect, but this is a state that always comes to the aid of its people. And in the audience, so New Mexicans can't see that, there are several local elected officials who have been working night and day to make sure that their constituents are safe and that they're getting the resources that they need and deserve. I do want to confirm, yesterday we confirmed 1 death, I think. There's been a lot of media attention. There's now confirmation for 2. An individual that we know succumbed to the fire, and the investigation about the cause of death is ongoing for the other individual. We are very concerned about the potential loss of life. We know that there are several people still unaccounted for. We are working directly with shelters. I'm going to remind folks about our hotline number. We can help get that reunification operation together if we're all doing it together and we don't have constituents going to several different places. But the shelters are ready to help us do that. Part of the problem is communications. So we have short-term cellular mobile cows, and they're helping the firefighters. They create that short-term or short-range communication operations that we need for first responders. What we don't have up and yet operational are more long-distance cellular mobile operations. We will get that done. I think it's called Cellular on Wheels, so make sure that my COW acronym makes sense to people viewing. We're working on getting those. That will really ease this communication gap between families and individuals who can't see their texts and don't have cell service. Now, the shelters are connecting people. No one would say no to a phone device that does have access to coverage, but we want to make sure we make that better and easier. And then the last thing before I give the number and go to the mayor. The Congresswoman, I appreciate her very much. We are not out of the woods. And while this weather is helpful to the fire, not helpful to the floods, we did 3 emergency rescues that I am aware of in this moment. I expect that there will have been more by the time we finish this press update. Stay out of the evacuation areas. Heed the flash flood warnings. 6 inches of water can knock you down. A foot of water can take your vehicle. Do not try and cross through any flooding anywhere. Follow the directions from the National Emergency Weather Alerts. Get to your nearest shelter. If you're not in an evacuation area, stay put. Or go to where we've got blockades and make sure the police are supporting you. Do not, I repeat again, do not try and cross any flooded areas on foot or otherwise. It's incredibly dangerous. want to thank Mayor Crawford for his incredible work. That's where he is right now. He's dealing with the flooding, and our Department of Transportation is helping with flood flows and debris mitigation and management. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Jennings, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Mayor Jennings.
Well, you know, just 2 weeks ago, we were proud because we've just been awarded the Reno Air Races, which will now be the Roswell Air Races. And you know what? I mean, it was amazing. We can't do that without our neighbors. It all had to be done by pooling everything together, just like getting our air flights to Roswell and to serve this area. So with the Reno Air, we were counting on thousands of beds in Ruidoso, and that's going to give us some problems. But worse than anything else, we have some friends that have problems. By the grace of God, it wasn't us, but it happened to them. And I have to tell you, I cannot thank this community and the surrounding communities, all from Tularosa, Artesia, Carlsbad, Portales. They've all been here sending cots, sending everything. And everything that could be water. I mean, we got a whole semi full at the Eastern University gym. We got all that the other night with all kinds of food. You know what? The thing you're going to learn about this, maybe our politicians are always fighting, but the people in our communities love each other. And I can't tell you enough how much that is. When I look and when you look at General Grizzle, I mean, this is his second major disaster. The first one was a mirror building in Oklahoma City, but he's here. His staff has been fantastic on what they've done. And I turn around and I look, because we're working with them. We've been working with the Institute. Our university, we out there, and when we got our notice about all this stuff was happening on, Monday afternoon, who was there but Sean Powell and Eastern? And yeah, they're out of school, everything else, but you know what? We'll get the cooks ready. We'll get it there. And you know what? It's all been fantastic. Our city staff has been fantastic. Chad Cole and Mike Matthews, even our weather queen has been great. She finally got rain here, but she was just 3 days too late. But that wasn't her fault. I mean, it was lost in the clouds. But really, what you see when you go to Church on the Move, and you go in there and you see the love and the care that is there, that you have boxes of undergarments for adults, children, and everything else all set out. And everybody is there because, when you got, 14 or 1,600 structures gone, what does that mean? If those structures are home, that means Ruidoso has lost 3,000 people out of 7,500 who's lost their bed. It's big. But when you go to one of these facilities, go and look at the care and the love that is there. Our congressional people sometime might fight, but the rest of us, the rest of people love each other. And I can't tell you what a blessing it is to be in this community and see what happens. And it's not just here, it's southeastern New Mexico. We're all together, working together. And as I've been a volunteer fireman for more than 50 years, and I was chief of the Duncan Fire Department. I spent days and days and days on fires, including the Scott Abel fire. I've been to fires in Ruidoso. I know what this is about. But please have everybody understand, this is not going to be over tomorrow. People can't go back until their communities are safe to go back to. And so this is something that's going to last a week, 2 weeks. It could even be a little longer. So please bear your patience. Please, let's keep working together, because we have to show those people who lost everything they had, only had the clothes on their back. We have to show them for the next month. And really, if we lost 1,500 houses or whatever in Ruidoso doesn't have houses to put them in. We have got to find houses, apartments, and buildings to put them in till they can decide where they're going to end up. So our work's not over. We have to keep working, and we have to be cognizant of the fact when someone goes and sees their home's gone and all they have is the clothes on their back, they're going to come back here and maybe look for a place to stay, and they're going to need some help mentally. You don't take something like this in stride. This is something that you can only survive if you have your friends and people who love you. So it's not over yet, but you know what? Lightning has struck, and we can make the best of it, and we're going to do it, but we can only do it if we all do it together. That's the only way it works, is together. And I thank God our city, county, our county has been good, our city's been good, our school's been good, the public schools, the university, we're all together. Nobody can beat you when you're together. So let's be sure we're all there for those people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to reiterate. I love this mayor. We know about 1,400 structures. We don't have any data about the number of total households affected and in what ways. And the incident command will start to do public briefings. One will occur sometime tomorrow afternoon. It'll be available via Zoom. We'll provide the links and the details and get that out to shelters, communities, and to the media. After that, they'll start to do in-person meetings in the communities most affected. And that, I think, will go a long way to answer very specific questions by individuals who want to know about fire behavior and where they can give you a glimpse of what they're expecting day to day. So that will also start to occur. Michael, why don't we take some questions?
Governor, thanks so much. I had a question about the cause. Do you have any updated information for the briefing today?
We don't. Again, speculation is seeming to sort of tick up a bit. And again, I'm not picking on social media. I think a lot of that just sort of gives way to people weighing into speculation. There are, as far as I know today, still 6 investigators. I believe there's an informal request, and what I mean by that is I don't see it in the paperwork for emergency management teams to get it in front of the feds or us, but we'll check it out, that maybe they need one more investigator. I'm not sure that they do. There's 6. Those 6 professionals who do this work will give us the cause of the fires as soon as they have them. And in this moment, I don't have anything more than I had yesterday.
And so, sorry, one more
Yep,
thing.
yep.
Is there any additional declarations now considering the floods? Like, will you amend your request to FEMA, or will there be additional?
I don't think that we will, even though they were very specific, as you know, to the fire, but it says, fire and impacts of fire. It is a very good question that I hadn't thought of, which is if we need to do any amendments to deal with flooding, particularly since some of the fire scars aren't related to the current activity, but are from, say, the McBride fire and other fires in this area over the past decade. So I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. I do know that we're concerned about the amount of rain and moisture and flooding and bridges, and I don't have an assessment yet from the team that is in the Ruidoso area dealing with the flooding now. I am going to do something a little bit unfair. I'm going to ask my communications director that if we have anything specific related to that we try to update the media, even though it'll be late, and I will take a look so I can have a better answer for your question. But I don't think I'm going to have to amend it.
I'm going to be reading just one more.
Yeah.
Do you have an Ruidoso, Alto, and Ruidoso Downs?
I don't. And the only reason I know there are some is because people are saying so. These are folks who aren't in that, that management incident communications team, so it's hard to really know. The Congresswoman and I were sort of thinking there ought to be kind of a standard where we know that X% aren't going to heed those warnings, just kind of give us a sense about what's going on. But more than I would like, because I worry about their safety. And I think it does cause added stress to the firefighting and first responding teams about who might still be in those areas. But I do know there are some people who stayed behind. I just don't have a number. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I'll just add, we have heard from the mayor and a number of local residents that there are still missing family members. And one of the challenges right now is because of spotty cell service and folks who may still be in the area who have not heard from their family members or vice versa. We do know that there are going to be search teams that go out starting tomorrow to look for folks. But I think it's important to just reiterate for a third time, if folks have not left an evacuation area yet, they need to leave.
Thank you.
I know rebuilding is already on some people's minds, wondering what they're going to go back to, and with some challenges of claims for the Hermit's Peak Cap Canyon fire, has there been any discussion of how this would be different, or any words of comfort you can give them on filing those claims and getting that process?
Well, in terms of words of comfort, this is a state that fronts money and doesn't wait for FEMA. If we waited for FEMA, my words of comfort might be pretty thin. And it's just that they are overwhelmed. They weren't built to rebuild. And even the claims, depending upon the types of the fire and what the liabilities are, aren't. And given that this is in what they will identify as a heavily insured area, believe it or not, that creates a whole other set of opportunities and challenges because they don't front door those assistance resources. So I would say that the comfort part, once again, is that the federal delegation is already asking for directed money already without knowing exactly what that will be or look like or how many people are affected. That's great work. And I know this sounds a little political, and I don't mean it to at all. This is not a political moment. But not every delegation agrees on whether or not that hits the number one priority, is recovery for people in natural disasters. Now, I don't understand that, but I want you to know that even when I was in Congress, that was debated heavily, including getting money for any number of hurricanes where their own members didn't think it was a priority. So this is great work. Another set of comforting words, I hope. I don't have to ask them. It just happens. 3, we're learning how to manage this slow bureaucratic process by FEMA and the state's expertise. It's not really a good thing when we have so much recovery going on, but our expertise has rapidly grown. So we will get those resource teams on the ground. We will stay. And one thing that's already underway for people is as soon as it's safer, so not too long, we hope, a week or 2 weeks. I mean, nobody knows. We are guessing here based on some of the weather patterns and fire behavior information. We'll bring a cabinet team. So the healthcare team, the Medicaid team, the general assistance team, the food stamp team, the children, youth, and families team, the stand-up immediate shelter for foster families, and everybody else. They will be here. You won't have to call. You won't have to travel. You won't have to get on the internet. They'll do that work for you right here. So I hope that feels like we're going to have to build housing. We're going to have to get those benefits and resources in the hands of people. We have to support local government who's already on this. And we're going to do everything we can to minimize how impactful and how hard this is for people. Yep,
add
yep,
something.
yep.
Can I add something on the federal side? I think it's really important for folks to understand that the nature of this fire, as far as we understand it now, is very different than the Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak fire. In that case, that was a fire that was generated by a prescribed burn by the federal government and led by Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez and Ben Ray Lujan and Senator Heinrich. They were able to do something that was actually unprecedented, which was to get federal legislation passed that would essentially attempt to make members of that community who had been impacted whole financially. It had been done by Senator Domenici 20-some years ago in the fire that happened in Los Alamos, but they were able to secure an unprecedented amount of money ever to do that. Now, the issue that many of those residents are facing is that it has been slowed for those payments to happen, and that is a separate issue from filing FEMA claims, insurance claims. All of these things are different bureaucratic processes, but I think it's important to also level set expectations. This is going to be a very long recovery. There are families who live up in these mountains who are living on properties that may or may not be insured. It may take a while for FEMA to get on the ground and start working with families to address their claims. But in the meantime, what I think is important and what the governor is saying is that the state will be there, our congressional offices will be there. We're working on setting up a joint case management process, and we will, as the mayor said, leverage every possible resource of our communities to help these families get through. And it will require all New Mexicans who are able to come, to help, to support these families, because it's going to take a long time, especially for those families who lost everything.
You know, one thing that a lot of people don't think about, but all of the fire waste has got to be disposed somewhere. And if you look, Ruidoso is a real unique place, and when we start looking about disposing of everything, that river runs right down through everything. And so we have to be extremely careful with that. But you have all the solid waste that are the fire remnants that are going to have to be disposed of somewhere. And when you look at the landfills in the areas around Ruidoso, that can fill up a lot of landfills really quick with tin, whatever, what's not recyclable, all that can fill out a lot of stuff. There has to be a lot of studying about what goes on and what we do to protect the watershed that is there because of the Ruidoso River and how valuable it is to this whole area. And so there's a lot that has to be done and thought about and thought through thoroughly. This is an extremely different thing. Ruidoso doesn't have, they don't have a big place like Roswell does to place, their waste. And so this is going to be something that we all have to sit down and study and look and figure out how to protect the watershed and everything else from erosion as well as everything else. And so it's just going to take a lot of study, a lot of time to work through. And then trying to figure out how to make sure kids still go to school. I mean, it's tough.
So you mentioned that you're going to work on cellular connections and stuff
For
like that.
longer, distances, yes.
For longer distances. So when can we see some of that kind of go into place?
I'm hoping that we can have something concrete to say about that as early as tomorrow. I don't think I can promise the delivery and installation by tomorrow. It was on the top of our list, as the general said, I think yesterday. They focus on the first responders, but it is on my top priority list, so maybe the general can give me some good news about when we might see a couple of those on their way.
We'll work it, but I think that there's some assessments that also need to be done. So we don't know why the cellular towers are not working right now.
That's right.
So we've got to get crews in. Could be a cut fiber, so it could be as simple as a fiber repair, then the cellular comes back, which would be great. Could be a power issue, or we could have lost a tower. And depending on what those issues are, that'll drive what we put in place, either temporarily or if we get our permanent towers up and running shortly. So as soon as it's safe to get to those sites, we'll be able to do those assessments.
Which is why we have to have one of the mobile devices or the, cellular on wheels, because we don't know how long some of that will take. But thank you for the clarification, Gemma.
And I can just add on, there's a number of different reasons why there's not service in different areas. So Mescalero has their own challenges, and there, as I understand it, there was an actual line that did get burned, and so that's part of why they're having challenges. In Ruidoso, they had to cut power for part of the communities in order to fight the fire itself. And their spotty service. But I do want to mention that for the evacuees that are going to shelters, whether it's here or in Capitan, we do have the providers are actually providing mobile hotspots as well as these cows. And in fact, the governor and I just visited Capitan just about an hour and a half ago, and there was probably 100 people sitting around checking their emails, making phone calls, trying to connect with family. So there is service that people can get. And so we encourage people to go to those hotspots, and we can help provide assistance on where those are.
One thing on the power grids, you have to understand, this is the end of the East Coast power grid is in Chaves County, and everything else west of here is on the West Coast power grid. So in other areas of the country, the power can go between states very easily. But because this is the end of all the things on the East Coast power grid, is right here, right down through Chaves County. And I know because my ranch is the first house on the West Coast grid out there. So that creates some unique problems with the area just because of the construction of the grids that we have across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roswell.